The Mystery of Kaspar Hauser. Chapter 1, The Stranger Arrives. On a quiet afternoon in the Bavarian city of Nuremberg, May 26, 1828, an unusual figure appeared. A young man around 16 or 17 years old staggered through the town square, his feet blistered, his clothes ragged, and his movements awkward, like someone who had just learned to walk. In his hand, he clutched a letter addressed to a local military officer, Captain von Wessenig. The letter was brief, stating that this boy, who called himself Kaspar Hauser, had been raised in isolation and was now ready to join the military, though he seemed far from suitable for such a role. When people attempted to speak with him, he responded only with a blank stare. The boy's only words were, "I want to be a horseman like my father was," repeated as if it were a refrain he'd learned by heart. Puzzled by his strange behavior and lack of understanding, townspeople brought him to the authorities, who placed him in custody for observation. But the boy was a mystery. He could barely speak, struggled to understand common objects, and seemed terrified of people. Who was this strange young man? Why had he been left at the city gates? These questions would haunt Germany and Europe for years. Chapter 2. The Child of the Cell. As Kaspar began to adjust to life in Nuremberg, authorities and townspeople tried to piece together the fragments of his past. Gradually, his language skills improved, allowing him to speak and recall his unusual life. What he revealed stunned them. Kaspar claimed he had spent nearly his entire life imprisoned in a small dark room with barely any light. He had never seen the outside world, sunlight, or other people. A mysterious man he never saw would bring him bread and water and occasionally change his bedding. He'd been left alone, his only toy a small wooden horse, and he claimed to have been in constant darkness. In this confinement, Kaspar had never experienced the warmth of sunlight or the coolness of fresh air. Many people were touched by his story, but others were suspicious. Who would keep a child imprisoned in such a cruel way? Was this strange young man a victim of a dark conspiracy? Or was there something he wasn't telling? The mystery deepened as Kaspar's innocent curiosity blossomed. He was fascinated by simple pleasures, the colors of flowers, the chirping of birds, the taste of fresh fruit. His wonder and naivety earned him the nickname, the Child of Europe, a mysterious figure who represented both human innocence and the shadowy dangers lurking in society. Chapter 3. The Lost Prince. Rumors spread across Germany, and soon people speculated that Kaspar Hauser was no ordinary boy. He seemed educated and well-mannered, despite his rough upbringing, and some saw in him the manners of the nobility. Historians, journalists, and curious onlookers began to wonder if he was a member of the aristocracy, a hidden prince or lost heir. Attention soon focused on the powerful House of Baden. According to some, Kaspar might be the rightful heir to the Grand Duchy of Baden, whose succession was clouded by mystery. According to local legends, the real prince had disappeared under suspicious circumstances years before, and many believed he had been replaced with an impostor to secure the line of succession for other heirs. Kaspar's appearance, age, and striking resemblance to the family of Baden led people to question if he was indeed this lost child. But others were skeptical. How could a noble family allow their own blood to endure such deprivation and suffering? Why hide an heir in a dark cell, only to release him as a teenager? For some, Kaspar's appearance in Nuremberg seemed more like a bizarre coincidence than the return of a lost prince. Chapter 4. The Shadowy Attacks. As Kaspar's fame grew, he attracted both admirers and enemies. In 1829, only a year after his arrival, he was found with a wound on his forehead, claiming he had been attacked by a man in black who threatened to kill him. According to Kaspar, this figure was the same mysterious caretaker who had brought him bread and water during his years in captivity. He said the man had told him, "You must die before you reveal too much." The townspeople were shaken, but some began to doubt his story. How could his captor have followed him, and why now? Some began to suspect that Kaspar might have staged the attack for sympathy, but others believed him wholeheartedly, fearing that whoever had hidden Kaspar was now desperate to silence him permanently. To protect him, Kaspar was moved to the care of Professor Daumer, a philosopher who believed in the boy's innocence and saw in him a symbol of pure humanity. With Dahmer, Kaspar continued to study, learn, and grow, but the shadow of his past remained. He was often anxious, seeming to sense that his life was still in danger. Chapter 5. Fame and Isolation. The years following his arrival in Nuremberg were filled with both attention and struggle. Kaspar found himself celebrated as a symbol of mystery and innocence, yet he couldn't escape his strange past. His eccentric behavior often puzzled those around him. He seemed to create contradictory memories, adding new details to his story or changing previous accounts of his life. He hinted at grand adventures or royal bloodlines but struggled to provide clarity. Some saw these contradictions as signs of trauma, while others suspected they were the inventions of a troubled mind. Several prominent benefactors and noble families took an interest in him, fascinated by the mystery and eager to sponsor his education. But many became frustrated with his erratic behavior and grew weary of the shadows that surrounded his story. Suspicion and whispers of fraud grew louder. Was he simply a troubled soul haunted by a cruel past? Or was he a clever manipulator who had created a story for his own gain? Kaspar's life grew increasingly isolated. Though he was surrounded by people, he often felt they viewed him as a curiosity, a puzzle to be solved. His relationships were fleeting, as people struggled to understand him and grew frustrated by his inconsistencies. Kaspar's sadness deepened, and he began to feel like a stranger in the world. Chapter 6. The Last Attack. On December 14, 1833, tragedy struck again. Kaspar stumbled back to his home in Ansbach, clutching a stab wound to his chest. He claimed that a shadowy man had lured him to a secluded part of the city with the promise of answers about his past and then attacked him. Despite the best efforts of doctors, his wound was fatal, and Kaspar died 3 days later on December 17, 1833. Near the scene, authorities found a small purse containing a cryptic note written in mirror writing and addressed to Mr. Hauser. The note contained jumbled words and a riddle, seemingly mocking the investigation and giving no clear answers. Some believed the note was left by his attacker, while others thought Kaspar himself had written it in a final attempt to add intrigue to his story. Theories immediately sprang up. Some believed Kaspar was indeed murdered by those who wished to silence him, while others claimed he had staged the attack himself in a desperate bid for attention. His death, like his life, was wrapped in mystery and suspicion. Chapter 7. The Theories. The questions surrounding Kaspar's life and death gave rise to a multitude of theories, ranging from royal conspiracies to psychological conditions. Some historians and researchers concluded that he might indeed have been connected to the House of Baden, hidden away to secure someone else's claim to power. Others suggested he was an illegitimate child abandoned in strange circumstances. Psychologists studying his case suggested that his captivity had resulted in severe trauma and dissociative symptoms, which could explain his fragmented memories and inconsistent stories. Some believed he had experienced isolation psychosis, a condition that causes individuals who have been deprived of human contact to create stories and identities as a coping mechanism. In 2002, DNA tests were conducted on samples believed to belong to Kaspar and compared with the bloodline of the Baden family. The results were inconclusive. They neither confirmed nor denied his possible royal heritage. With no family connections or clear answers, the mystery of his origins persisted. Chapter 8. Legacy of an Enigma. Today, Kaspar Hauser's story continues to captivate minds across Europe. Statues, plaques, and books keep his legacy alive, celebrating him as both a tragic victim and a symbol of the unknown. He has inspired numerous works of literature, plays, and films, each retelling the mystery and tragedy of the boy who appeared out of nowhere. For some, he is a symbol of innocence and humanity's desire to find truth. For others, he represents the deep psychological scars that can result from trauma. His life and death are reminders of the fine line between reality and myth, fact and fiction, truth and deception. And though history has left us with no definitive answers, the story of Kaspar Hauser remains a haunting question. a tale of an innocent caught between darkness and light, whose life asks us to consider the mystery of identity and the secrets that might lie within us all.